Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. I'm sure there may be a few of you who have been blessed with a traditional nuclear family that lives up to all the ideals. I'm guessing you've had just minor, not major problems. You have never had a divorce. There has always been one wife and one husband, between 1.5 and 2.5 children. Never divorced, never played around, raised the kids to be perfect models of respectability. If any of you exist out there, you are blessed. It is a true blessing and reason to be grateful and thankful. However, there are those who speak very blithely about such a model of existence and call it biblical family values, by which they mean happy, shiny people who hold hands and do the best things very conservatively. In addition, say those folks, the Bible provides a guide for the family values in which they live. How many of you have heard of that? Oh, okay. Only 3, 4, 5? Well, those of you who have heard of it and maybe still believe it, which of the biblical family values do they mean? Do they mean the wonderful children of Noah, who I would not wish on anybody? Do they mean the values demonstrated by Abraham when he was in Egypt and the Pharaoh took a liking to his wife and he called her his sister so that he wouldn't end up getting killed? Perhaps it's the exemplary abuse of power that King David used in order to obtain Bathsheba. That kind of family value? Or perhaps Jephthah's butchery of his own daughter because he made a vow that he would sacrifice whatever came out the door when he arrived home after a military victory. I mean, when you get down to it, even Jesus is a little bit suspect on this matter. You may remember when he was sitting teaching, and his disciples said to him, "Lord, your mother and brothers and sisters are outside." And Jesus responds, "Do you remember this? Who are my mother and brothers and sisters? It's those who do the will of God." I think most of us agree that loyalty is a good thing, that faithfulness is a good thing, that commitment is a good thing. But those three qualities exist with just one in the Bible, and that is God. Those three qualities are violated time and time again by not just the people of the Old Testament, but the disciples. Well, anyway, that takes me a little far afield, but here we have Jacob. A real sterling character, Jacob. Jacob and Esau are born as fraternal twins, and they arrive in this world and they couldn't be more different. Esau, he's the hunter. He's a man of action. He's the kind of guy who would sell his inheritance for a good hot meal. That last part sounds good to me. But Jacob is a little different. He's crafty, a little shifty, somewhat underhanded. You remember he fooled his old blind father with the help of Rebekah, his doting mother, into getting the inheritance for himself. Okay, that's our setting right there. Because Rebekah begins hearing stories that Esau is muttering about murdering his brother. How's that for family values? And she persuades old blind Isaac to let Jacob go away and seek a wife among Rebekah's people, in fact, her brother Laban. And so this is where the story picks up. Jacob has taken off. He knows full well that his brother is after him, so he's a fugitive. You might even call him a refugee. He's on the fly with a very firm sense that somehow he is fleeing violence. Now, if it weren't for the fact that it's the Bible, how would you feel about Jacob? Lots of people say, well, it's in the Bible. He was God's man. That's really cool. So we just go with the flow on that. What a worthy guy. You know what? It's hard to work up any sympathy for Jacob. He's not running because he was falsely accused of something. He, in fact, has done something wrong, and his mama has aided and abetted that. He's the fair-haired boy. Do you have any of those in your family? Well, fair-haired girl, too. Do you have any of those? So here's the way this thing sets up. Jacob flees from Esau, and then in next week's scripture, we find him going back toward Esau. And this is framed, in both cases, by dreams. And this is the first of them, as he's fleeing from his brother. This is the one where there's a ramp or a ladder that goes clear from where Jacob is all the way up to heaven. It's a dream. And the angels of God are ascending and descending on this ladder or this ramp. It's a very interesting dream when you get down to it. Look at verse 12 right quick. He dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending. And then all of a sudden, what do we get? God standing right next to him. And God gives him this remarkable promise about land and being present with him. It's an affirmation. And it's not an affirmation of what Jacob has done, but of simply who he is. I find that very intriguing. And so Jacob wakes up, and what does he do? First of all, there's an affirmation on his part. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Has that ever happened to you? Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. That's happened to me a number of times. And it's only in retrospect that it makes any sense at all to me that the Lord was in that place, and I did not know it. But that affirmation is immediately followed by fear, we're told. He was afraid. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So here's a guy, he's awakened, and this is the same morning. He sets this stone up on its side as a memorial, and then he pours oil over it. But here's the part that gets me, and because it gets me, you get it too. Here's the part that gets me. He then sets up this conditional thing. If you do this, then I will do that. Let's look at verse 20. If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I may come again to my Father's house in peace, and the Lord shall be my God. Well, that's nice. He's not asking too much, is he? If you do this, then you will be my God, and I will set this place up. And by the way, I'll give you a tenth of what I have. He's hedging his bets. It's the part that I find intriguing. Even as a refugee, Jacob is bargaining. He's bargaining like crazy. Now here's the deal. For Jacob, it is a conditional thing. But God makes a completely gracious and unmerited promise in the dream, right? God makes a promise to this man. And Jacob received the grace of God, fleeing a situation that would place him in the way of great violence. A couple of months ago, according to a memo from the Secretary of Homeland Security, John Kelly, some 155,000 unaccompanied child migrants have been apprehended at the border in the past 3 years. Those kids pass through shelters that are in turn run by the Department of Health and Human Services and are often reunited with their relatives here in the States. But Kelly, in this memo, took issue with that. He wrote that 60% of them have been placed in the care of one or more undocumented parents. And the memo suggests that the government will take a closer look at these cases and reclassify unaccompanied kids as simply undocumented immigrants and will deport them. Somehow that doesn't seem like unmerited grace to me. Somehow that doesn't seem like the same thing that happened between God and Jacob. I recognize this is a politically complicated issue, this business of refugees, and it's further complicated by unaccompanied children who are on or within our borders. But I'll be frank with you, no matter what your politics are regarding this crisis, and it is one, I invite you to remember back when the mayor of Grand Prairie and members of the school board of that city and the city council announced that they were more at ease with unaccompanied children being temporarily housed in one of their unused schools. And many of the neighbors gave very vocal support for this issue. One said, and I quote, "As a mother of 4, I feel for these kids, these families, and I'm okay with it. As a Christian, we're supposed to invite and welcome." The only objections came from other neighbors, and the objections were that they should not put a fence around the school to keep the children in. So what does it mean when we say we choose welcome? Does it have anything to do with the way God responded to this personed Jacob? God responded with grace upon grace. God responded with compassion. He didn't treat Jacob with fairness. Well, I'll simply say for myself, I'm glad God does not deal with me out of fairness, because I'm sunk if that's so. If I'm to be righteous and upright all the time and live an ideal existence, I have already blown it. My hunch is that you have as well. Unmerited grace. We don't deserve it, but God keeps dishing it out. God keeps on dishing it out. It doesn't mean that we have not gotten or need something we deserve. It simply means that God has laid it on us anyway. Grace upon grace. And we're no different in some ways than Jacob. I'm going to close with just 2 questions, and you should be able to remember them, but if not, you may write them down. I simply want you to try to answer them for yourself, and this is probably not a good time to do it. The first of those is pretty simple. Have you ever had an experience of love that you did not deserve, and you knew it came from God, even though it may have been through a human agency? You got that? An experience of love that you did not deserve, but which nevertheless you had a sense came from God, even though it might have been human agency. The second's easier, and at the same time harder. How did you respond to that? The answers to those questions have to do with God being present for those of us who don't deserve it. Amen.